A submarine is a formidable weapon capable of wiping out an entire city. But like any complex structure, it can malfunction. Even a minor failure can lead to a terrible tragedy. We will tell you about major submarine accidents in the history of the USSR and Russia right now. Before you watch this video, I'm going to ask you to support my channel with a thumbs up. It won't cost you anything, but it means a lot to me and my channel. Thank you. Submarines carry serious ammunition on board. If a torpedo or a missile explodes inside the hull, the crew would be in trouble. An example is the sad story of nuclear-powered submarine K2-19. The submarine had 16 missile silos and one of them started leaking. One day, under water pressure, the missile deformed and exploded, killing a man. After the accident, the submarine underwent an overhaul, but a few years later another rocket silo began to leak. The water was pumped out, and the officer in charge did not even report it to the commander. The submarine underwent various inspections before going to sea, but each time the problem was considered non-critical. Gradually, the situation worsened, the water had to be pumped out more often. In '86, while the sub was underwater and patrolling the US coast, there was an accident. It followed a familiar pattern. At depth, water filled the shaft and under pressure, the rocket exploded. 3 people died. The submarine surfaced and a new problem arose. The temperature in the nuclear reactor began to rise. It was impossible to shut it down remotely because the power supply was disrupted. Sergei Preminin, a 20-year-old sailor, entered the reactor compartment and manually lowered the compensating grids, thereby preventing a nuclear explosion. Sergei could not come back out, the compartment door was jammed. He died of suffocation and overheating. The next day Soviet ships approached the crash site. The crew of K2-19 was evacuated. The submarine was taken in tow. The Americans were watching what was happening from the air and sea. During the towing, for unknown reasons, the cable broke and the nuclear-powered cruiser sank at a depth of 5,500 meters. Films have been made and books written about the accident. Sergei Preminin was awarded the title of Hero of Russia posthumously. His name was given to the streets, the embankment, the school, and the museum. The submarine commander Igor Britanov was first tried, but then they changed their minds. The nuclear submarine K429 sank twice throughout its history. After the first sinking, the submarine was actually out of order. In '83, after a long voyage, the nuclear submarine had to be repaired due to a number of systems malfunctions. However, the military leadership decided to suddenly send the boat for training firing without repairs. The main crew was called in from leave, but not all, so more than half of the crew was recruited from 5 other submarines. With numerous irregularities, the K429 went to sea. In Saranoy Bay, Kamchatka, during a test dive, water gushed through the ventilation of the 4th compartment and completely flooded it, killing 14 people. According to various sources, it was either a malfunction or the crew had not prepared for the dive. The boat went down on the ground at a depth of 40 meters. No one on shore knew about the incident. The emergency buoy did not surface. 2 submariners were sent to the surface. Only when they were accidentally discovered by a warship, the rescue operation began. More than 100 sailors were brought to the surface by free surfacing, through the emergency airlock in the 7th and a torpedo boat in the 1st. In spite of the divers' backup, 2 more men died. The rescue lasted 4 days. The incident was classified. The submarine commander Nikolai Suvorov was sentenced to 10 years in prison, of which he served 3 years in a penal colony and was released under amnesty. The submarine was raised from the bottom and sent for repairs. 2 years later, it sank right at the pier. The K429 then became a training station and then was scrapped. In the history of seafaring, there have been known cases when submarines collided with ships. In the fall of '81, such an accident ended in great tragedy. In the evening, the diesel submarine S-178 was going above water to Vladivostok after a training mission. Several people, along with the commander, were on the bridge outside the boat when suddenly, out of the darkness came out a fishing boat. According to some reports, the boat's crew was drunk, and the sailing lights were out. The submarine was mistaken for a small tugboat, which would give way on its own. When the collision happened, the submarine immediately went down. A huge hole was formed in the sixth compartment. Half of the crew were killed. 26 sailors managed to lock themselves in the forward compartments. The depth of the submarine was 32 meters. There was not enough breathing apparatus for everybody. There was virtually no food or water. The 27-year-old XO Sergei Kubanin took over the command. Using the communication cable, he reported the situation to the surface. Soon the cable broke. Help was delayed. It was becoming psychologically hard. To boost morale, Kubanin awarded the submariners with military badges and promoted each of them to a higher rank. The rescue operation began on the second day. The sailors came out through the torpedo tubes and were met by divers and were escorted aboard a salvage submarine, which lay near the accident site. Some divers fought off the divers and surfaced, themselves suffering lung injuries. Some were killed, 6 disappeared without a trace. 2 had stopped their hearts from the stress they were under. The situation was so extreme. The tragedy was classified for 25 years. The C-178 was hoisted and scrapped, and a monument was made of the deckhouse. The commander of the submarine, Valery Marengo, was given 10 years in prison. The captain and the chief officer were sentenced to 15 and 10 years, respectively. The fire on the submarine can lead to terrible consequences. There are a lot of combustible materials on board. If not extinguished in time, the fire can not only poison people with carbon monoxide, but also make a hole in the hull of even the sturdiest submarine. Such was the case with the nuclear-powered K-278 Komsomolets, which was considered to be extremely reliable. Thanks to its titanium hull, the submarine set an absolute record of diving 1027 meters. In '89, the Komsomolets was performing its third combat campaign and patrolled the Norwegian Sea. At a depth of 380 meters, there was a fire in the last 7th compartment. The reactor protection went off and the submarine lost power. In order to surface, the command "blow the main ballast" was given. The air flowing through the damaged conduit was blown into the source of the fire. A blast furnace effect occurred. The temperature of the fire reached 1,000 degrees. An adjacent compartment caught fire. When the boat surfaced, the sea outside was boiling from contact with the hull. People were dying of burns and carbon monoxide poisoning. For 6 hours the crew tried to put out the fire, but to no avail. The Komsomolets began to sink. No one expected this from the sturdiest submarine. Almost the entire crew found themselves in icy water, in stormy weather, with only one life raft, which still need to swim to. In addition, not everyone had time to leave the boat. At the time of the flooding, 5 people made it over to the surfacing life preserver, but there was no way to disconnect it, for free surfacing was not possible. The live men were trapped and were submerged at 1,600 meters. The water pressure was increasing. Already at the critical depth, there was an explosion that literally pushed the escape chamber to the surface. Of those who were inside, only one survived, Midshipman Viktor Slyosarenko. About an hour after the boat sank, the first Soviet vessel approached. All this time, the sailors spent in the cold water. Many died of hypothermia. The investigation did not determine the cause of the fire. The main version is a fire of electrical equipment. One of the most terrible tragedies of the submarine fleet was the sinking of the nuclear submarine Kursk 141. In the summer of 2000, during an exercise in the Barents Sea, the submarine sank at a depth of 108 meters. No one on the surface knew about the accident, so the emergency was not declared until 12 hours later. The Kursk was found lying on the ground, with a huge hole in its bow. There was still hope that there were people alive inside, but the rescue operation was delayed. It was not until the 11th day after the accident that Norwegian divers were able to penetrate into the interior compartments. No signs of life were found. All 118 people were dead. The boat was raised to investigate the causes of the wreck. According to the official version, a training torpedo exploded on board. Torpedo exploded in preparation for launching. The water started to flow into the first compartment. It is difficult to say what happened next, but 2 minutes later, several more torpedoes detonated, either as a result of a massive fire or a ground impact. The explosion was so powerful that the hull of the submarine was blown apart, and the internal compartments were flattened. There are alternative versions of the crash, from a collision with an American submarine to a wartime mine explosion. Later, a note was found in the dead officer Dmitry Kolesnikov's pocket. It said to survive the accident and shut themselves in the ninth compartment were able to 23 people. It is assumed that the sailors lived no more than a day and died of carbon monoxide poisoning. There was a fire, which burned out all the remaining oxygen. In Murmansk, the hull of the nuclear submarine Kursk became a part of the memorial to fallen seamen submariners. Commander Gennady Lyakhin was awarded the title Hero of Russia. A school in the city of Volgograd was named after him. I thank you for watching. Your support is very important to me. Your comments and thumbs up motivate me to release new videos on interesting topics. Subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the new videos.